Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It has been a really long time since we have gone live. And we're still kind of working out the technical issues. We have never used Streamlive. We have never used this software before. It's very new to us, and thank goodness for Denise Pridemore because she kind of walked me through it. It's been about a year and a half since we've gone live, but we have been asked over and over again to go live again. Because we used to, for those of you that are new to Colorado Martini in the last year, we used to actually go on live quite a bit. We used to have a Saturday night show called Cocktail Time, and we would come on and make cocktails out of our Colorado Martini book. And we would talk about the history of the drinks that we were making and the alcohol that we were making. And we would, that's kind of where the whole history thing started with Colorado Martini. And it just got to be a little bit too much. And we just stuck to videos. But we've had a lot of people really request for us to start doing this again. And here we are. So that now, for those of you that are new to us, now you know where the name Colorado Martini comes in, because we were writing a book called Colorado Martini, but YouTube kind of took over. And that book's been kind of sitting on my shelf ready to publish. And but we're hoping to do some lives and kind of bring things back, but not full bore. So we're kind of waiting for some people to come in today. So we've got JD Knight 7, who has been a supporter of ours since the beginning. If you're not following JD Knight, definitely, follow him. He is a wonderful supporter and has been a great friend to this channel. Kid 74 is here tonight also. He's one of our local Colorado YouTubers. We actually just met, and he has just been absolutely wonderful. So if you're not following JD Knight 7 or Kid 74, definitely give them a look-see. We also have Lucky Dog Productions, who has been a wonderful friend recently. They do travel videos also, and they have just been absolutely wonderful. So definitely give them a look-see. And then there's Rose Bisp. Rose is wonderful. She does these earthquake reports. And she comes on many times a day and gives the world earthquake reports. And if you want to know anything about what's going on in the world when it comes to earthquakes, check out Rose. Rose is wonderful, and she is so dedicated. And she is the USGS, which is the U.S. Geologic Society at its best. So definitely check her out. She could definitely use the support, and we want to get all these people, monetized as quick as we can. They're just absolutely wonderful people. Who else do we have here today? Going up the chat. So we got Lucky Dog Productions, and we got Kara McCoy, which is one of our Facebook supporters. She's been absolutely wonderful recently with our Facebook report, our Facebook posts, and we thank her for that. And Peter Dell is new to me. Peter, tell us about your channel in the chat. We'd absolutely love to hear about your chat. I mean, about whatever you have, whether it's social media or your channel. So as people are coming, and the Steel One is a local YouTuber here in Colorado. He does exploring a lot more than we do. He's always going to he goes to places before we're able to get there. We'll have a plan. The Steel One's already there. He has this wonderful channel where he goes to ghost towns. He goes to haunted locations. He goes to graveyards. He's abandoned buildings. He's all over Colorado. So definitely check out the Steel One. And the Steel One, you actually did a couple of videos with Omar Gosh, didn't you? Let us know in the chat, because I'm pretty sure you did. I remember you went to the Stanley with Omar Gosh. I remember that now. And if you're not familiar with the Stanley Hotel, you're into the paranormal, you should know the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel is like 30 minutes from us here in Colorado. It's Estes Park. It's not Estes Park. It's Estes Park. And it is this beautiful hotel that the Stanleys built. And they were the Stanley steamers, as in the cars. He and his brother built the Stanley steamer cars. And the hotel is very haunted. And it is the inspiration for The Shining. And years and years ago, Stephen King, he was getting very stale in his writing. It was always about Castle Rock and New England. And so his editor said, you need to get out of New England. You need some new writing inspiration. So he came here to Colorado. And he was based out of Boulder, just down the street from us. And he wrote The Stand. And that's why The Stand is based in Colorado, in Boulder. And he and his wife took a vacation up at the Stanley Hotel, but they got caught in a blizzard and couldn't come back to Boulder. So they were snowed in with the staff of the Stanley, and they ate with them and sat, hung out with them. And the Stanley staff told him all these ghost stories. And then he ended up having a dream that night, and voila, The Shining was born. And so, and that's up here up in Estes Park, Colorado, in the Stanley, and it's absolutely wonderful. So the Steel One went there with Omar Gosh probably about a year ago. And did, kind of went around the hotel and did a little bit of a paranormal investigation, but it is a hot spot. It definitely is. We haven't gone there without catching something, but it's gotten very expensive. And unless you pay them to do an investigation, it's kind of hard to do investigations there nowadays. So let's go ahead and move on. We've got, now that we've had some people that have come in, I wanted to make an announcement. The Colorado Martini is branching out to podcasting. We've had a lot of influence to podcast, and by some wonderful podcasters. One of them is our guest tonight, Denise Pridemore. And we've been on a couple of podcasts, and they've encouraged us to start one. So we're branching out, and it's called The Strange by Colorado Martini. And the first season is actually coming out in January. But this is our trial run with Denise, because Denise is a good friend of Colorado Martini. And plus, I love her name. It's my name, Denise. I'll never forget it. And so Denise has this wonderful podcast. It's called Paranormal Pride Radio. And she's been very involved with the paranormal. And it being October, we definitely have to talk about the strange in October. And she's also an expert about the Sallie House, which is a very haunted location in Kansas. And she's such an expert that she was on Ghost Adventure as the expert go-to person for, well, I think it was season 9 episode. Do you know off the top of your head?
Originally, it was season 10, episode 6, but they keep changing the number. I don't know why. And
I'm so glad that you said that, because every time I'm looking for something on Ghost Adventures, it's like, okay, wait, is it, I can't find it because the episode numbers never line up.
Right. And then recently it was back on Screaming Room just 2 weeks ago. So I've been getting.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's Ghost Adventures has, because of quarantining and all this other stuff, they decided to do this new thing where they review their shows in like a theater atmosphere, kind of like science fiction television shoot that 3000 or whatever. And so they're going through all this, and that's what they're doing, is calling out things from their scariest episodes. So that was just on, and I'm apparently on one of those scariest episodes.
Oh, okay. So I always watch Ghost Adventures when I'm looking for information about a location I'm going to. So I don't watch them week by week. I just spot watch them. Mm-hmm. And I know when you and I were first met, we were coming on your show, Paranormal Pride Radio. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to learn more about you. So I was trying to find an episode, and I had the hardest time finding it, Go ahead.
Dailymotion is the best way to find it. That website has a bunch of the episodes within a week of when they air.
Okay. Yeah, it's crazy the way, if you go into YouTube, and then if you try to watch them on YouTube, it's very chopped because they're trying not to get copyright strikes.
Right. So Dailymotion is approved, and it's not on YouTube. It's just a website. And that's when, when my boss goes, "Now, what was that show again?" And I have to send him the link. The link changes often. That's what's really bad about it, is the link does change often. But that's where I send everybody to when they go, "I want to see this." Because recently on vacation, that's when I found out that the episode number had changed again. Because we were at a location, the El Rancho Hotel in Gallup, New Mexico. And while we were there, well, it's known to be haunted. That's the first thing. But we needed a cheap hotel because we were spending way too much money on hotels. And this place was pretty cheap. And so we go in, and we're in the really cute gift shop that they have. And suddenly all the power in the hotel goes out. So after the power comes back on, we go down to the bar. And Ron asks the bartender, says to her, "Did the power outage affect you guys down here too?" And she goes, "Yes, it did." And she goes, "Thank God it wasn't last week when Ghost Adventures was here." And I looked at my husband. I said, out of all people to say that to, and so that's when we told her, yeah, we know Justin Spurrier personally because he's from Kansas. He's the tech guy. And I said, and then I was on there, and she goes, "You were?" And that's when we had to find the episode. And so she started bringing us our drinks, and you could see that she kept going back to her phone to watch the episode. So I thought it was kind of funny that out of all people to mention it to us. So,
I'll tell you, the Sallie House is, wow, that place. Why don't you tell us about the Sallie House, where it's located, the backstory, how you ended up on Ghost Adventure?
So basically, the Sallie House is in the town of Atkinson, Kansas, and it was built between 1869 and 1871. So contrary to what you hear on TV, some of the stuff they've said was wrong.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. They said
what? Ghost Adventures said something that was false?
Well, hell, even the Zillow listing for the house was wrong. Okay, it says it was built in 1900. So, needless to say, lots of research went into this. But the house was completed in 1871 when the people moved into the house that originally built the house. So that's just part of the things. But in the past, back in 1994, the Sallie House was on a haunting. Okay. And it was an amazing story that this guy was being attacked by a ghost. Back in 1994, none of us had heard about this, So then they were on sightings, and I saw that. And, I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, thought that Atchison was a really far away place because of the fact that I didn't know where it was. Didn't have internet in 1994. So I let it go. kind of let it go. About 2008, 2009, we decided we were going to go up there. I had got internet, knew some things at this point. My daughter had gotten me the Sallie House book for Christmas, and I read it. I mean, 5 or 6 times. Okay, I read every word. I knew every word in the book, and I told Ron, I go, we need to go up and do the tour. I said, they've got a trolley tour. Let's go take it. So it was in July, and we went on the trolley tour. I had my little Haunted Atkinson book. Okay. It's stories that were written by the Chamber of Commerce. And in the margins, I was writing notes the whole time. I was hardly looking at the houses. I was listening. I was taking notes and taking it as gospel. Okay. I took every word that was said on that trolley tour as gospel, that it was all true. So we get to the Sallie House, and they tell a story about a little girl that died from a botched appendectomy. And I looked at my husband, I go, that's not what they said on a haunting. I said, on a haunting, they said it was a little girl. A doctor lived in the house, and he had an affair with his nurse, and they had a mulatto baby, and that they hid her. She was a love child, and she was hidden from everybody. And she got pneumonia, and she died. And it's like, so I'm believing the TV. I'm going, well, why would a haunting lie to me? So there's that. And so we get off the tour and we go home. And the whole time I'm pissed because somebody lied to me. I don't know who, but somebody lied to me. And so we go back in September when they had the tours at the Sallie House. There was every Saturday from 1 to 5. For $10, you could go in there and you could be in the house.
So this is like a regular home.
No, not. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Nobody lives there. And so we go to the Atkinson Chamber of Commerce. We get our little tickets, and we go to the place. And we go in, and there's these people standing around that supposedly tour guides. Okay, They were basically security. Keep you from going down the stairs into the basement, to keep you from going into any room they didn't want you to go in, not to cross these lines. They had ropes everywhere. And I would ask questions. So we walk in the house and going, this doesn't look like the house on a haunting. I don't know what in the hell they're telling me here. So again, I'm mad. And we walk into the kitchen, and there's a sign on the basement door. The door's open, but there's a sign hanging on it. And it says, a lady fell to her death on these stairs. And I was like, well, that's easy enough to find out. You can research that and find it. So we walk through the house, and there's these signs pasted on all the walls telling what happened in the house. There's a movie on, the Robbie Thomas movie, about the Sallie House. Mm-hmm. And that's on, but only the beginning part. Okay, the beginning part shows a doctor doing a botched appendectomy in the house on a little girl. And it was done by Atkinson actors. And it's like, okay, well, I can understand why they'd be doing that. And it's really loud and annoying. But again, we go upstairs, and there is a rope across the door to the nursery. The bathroom door is closed with a sign on it saying, do not enter. And then the other rooms you could go in. And so basically everybody would walk up the steps and stand in front of the nursery and look for toys to move, things like that. So as we're walking around, of course, we're just reading these signs, and there's just people standing there making sure that you're behaving yourself. And I'm like, well, okay, I can still do whatever it is I want. We brought dowsing rods, and we brought our ghost meter. We bought all this stuff with us, which you cannot now. So keep that in mind. You can't now.
Oh, really? They don't let you bring your own equipment in?
Not for the tours. So we went to, when we were done, it was like, well, this was really neat. We got to go back. So we met some people, and we made arrangements to come back the following week. So we bought our ticket, got there at 1:00, and we stayed there until they kicked us out at 5:00. And we had some experiences. Actually, I ended up showing a little girl how to use dowsing rods and talking to her about spirits and stuff. And then in another room, we walked in there and there was a woman there. In fact, we just talked about this last night when we were camping in the graveyard. We were sitting in there with this woman who had just lost her dad. She had to pull the plug. Okay. She was really upset. And it was her mom's 60th birthday. And we had noticed that people were getting in this one room, happened to be getting a lot of their own personal spirits were coming through, not spirits of the house, but their own spirits. And so the woman started asking questions, and because I had dowsing rods, she assumed I knew what I was doing. And I said I did, because I had learned how to use dowsing rods at McPike Mansion not long before that. And so only person that knew the answers to these questions was this young woman who had to pull the plug on her dad. And so needless to say, it was really odd when all the answers were right. That's when she started asking other questions and the dowsing rods were answering them. And she got the answers that she wanted. Her and her mother left the house crying, but with tears of joy. And that's when I told Ron that following week, I said, I got to find a way to get in there for free. I can't keep paying for this. And so I contacted my company to find out how I could volunteer and make money for the Atkinson Chamber of Commerce, not for the Sallie House, but for the Chamber of Commerce. And they said, if you volunteer for 40 hours a quarter or 40 hours a half year, we will pay them $500. And my husband's company would match his hours with dollars. So they were getting about $1,100 from July to December from me and Ron. So that was how, I hate how this is so backwards. So needless to say, we found a way to volunteer. So we didn't get paid. We paid them through our companies to let us volunteer. So the first thing we did when we became tour guides was we went in there and we learned the things that they were saying about the house. They gave us a script and told us this is what we had to say. And every time I'd have to say the script, I would leave with bruising on me, on my arm all the time. And we did not know why. And it was mostly because how I felt that I was telling a lie. I felt like I was disrespecting the doctor that lived in the house. I did not feel like there was something ominous there from the doctor. I thought it was something else. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the first year we didn't do very many hours. The lady didn't understand how the volunteering stuff worked. And we only did it maybe 5 times from September to Halloween. And keep in mind, we live 90 miles from there. So it wasn't like we were just going down the street. We were driving 90 miles each way every weekend for 7 years, from between September and the Day of the Dead. Mm-hmm. They changed it later on to, hey, we went into the first weekend of November. So the next year we had a new boss at the Sallie House, and she gave me full control. We took down all the ropes. We opened up the basement. We opened up the nursery. We even let people use the bathroom. Yeah, who thought that'd be important?
You wouldn't let people use the bathroom before?
No. Well, at one time we didn't even have water in the house, so we couldn't. That was even worse. We used to bring big jugs of water with us in case there was an accident, so somebody had to go, so that they could at least use the toilet. But again, like I said, we were doing that all the time. If there was people that needed a tour, they would ask, can Denise and Ron do our tour? Because Denise tells the truth. So after that first year, I started researching everything to do with the Sallie House. I have a book this thick of paper That's not counting all the stuff on my computer, of paper, of stories that I have about Dr. Finney, Dr. Finney's family, the people who built the Sallie House, because everything that they did was in the newspaper. Because
you went out and researched the newspapers to find these stories?
Because that was the easiest way to find out facts about the family. I could find their birth. I could find some of their birth records. We didn't keep death records in Kansas until 1905. So death records were a little bit harder to find, but I was able to research all of that. So when people come to me and say, "Is Sallie here?" I was like, "Can you prove to me Sallie ever existed?"
So, okay, so step back. So who is Sallie?
Sallie is the name that Barbara Connor, she came to the house after Deb and Tony Pickman requested help because they didn't know what was happening to them. So they kept having things happen in the house that they couldn't explain. Fires, Tony getting scratched, weird smells, toys being moved around and all that. In fact, at first, they thought Deb and Tony Pickman, who were renting the house, thought that their brother-in-law, or Tony's brother, was breaking into the house and playing pranks on them. And he wasn't. And so eventually they got to the point to where they decided that they were going to call for some help. And so a local person knew this lady, Barbara Connor, and Barbara Connor came in the house. And when she walked into the house, when you walk into the front door of the Sallie House, the stairs going upstairs are right there.
Mm-hmm.
And she walked in the house, and the first thing she says, "Oh, there's a little girl up there," and says that, and tells them her name is Sallie and that she wants to be treated like a member of the family.
Uh-huh.
So for people who only lived there 18 months, they had so many experiences that they ended up on, like I said, on sightings. They were on sightings 4 times. They were on a haunting twice. Haunting tried to come there more often, and Tony said no. In fact, if you've watched sightings the first couple times, their name is not shown.
Really?
No, that's blurred. They don't have their name on there because Atchison is a small town. There's maybe 9,100 people there now. So back then there was probably a few more, but it's a very depressed town. And everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows everybody's business, and it's horrible. But that's a whole nother story. But they were renting the house, and so at some point it got so bad that, and this is from Deb and Tony's book. Okay, this is not a firsthand account from me. This is straight from their book. And they've also said it on TV. And when we met them, we did not meet them until after Ghost Adventures. Okay, so Ghost Adventures was filmed 6 years ago this past week. So we did not know them 6 years ago. We met them in April 2015. So it's at least a 6 months difference between the time that we met them and that was filmed. And Tony said, he goes, "We had to get out of that house. I was going to kill Deb."
Really?
And he had already killed a cat in that house. And it is documented in their book. So, and when they lived in the house, when they first moved in the house, Tony works nights. He still does to this day at a grain elevator. He worked nights and he would sleep days. So one day the laundry was going. He thought that Deb had started the laundry before she left, and he could hear bump, 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 bump in the dryer. So we all know what that sounds like. Sounds like tennis shoes drying in the dryer. He didn't think anything of it. Later on, Deb comes home and Tony says, "Did you have to start the dryer before you left? It was really noisy." And she goes, "I didn't start the dryer." So they go down there, and the dryer at this time is in the kitchen. Okay, they didn't have anything in the basement. The dryer was in the kitchen, and they pull out the laundry, and there's all this rust-colored stuff on it. They don't know. She's like, "I don't even know what this is." It was their cat. So a spirit in the house had killed their cat.
God.
So that was the first cat, and then right not long before they moved out, Tony admits in the book that he had killed a stray cat in the house. And so the house actually does have spirit cats. You can feel them rub up against you when you're standing there talking. And I've seen women's skirts move, like the cat tail hit the skirt. I mean, women know what I'm talking about. They've felt a cat rub up against them and their skirt move.
So do you hear them? I mean, do you hear like meows or
every once in a while you do? If you're listening really close. The bad part is the walls are so thin that sometimes you actually hear the people next door, and it's on a main road going to a Benedictine college. So it's kind of noisy anyway. So unless it's between midnight and 3 a.m. and there's no activity going on, you might be able to hear an actual EVP. But that's some of the things that we know of there. So after the Pickmans moved out, there was this woman who was a local nurse that decided to rent the house. There had been bunches of other people that couldn't stay. Mrs. Fish was there the longest after the Pickmans left. And she was into witchcraft and the dark side of witchcraft, where she was doing animal sacrifices and things like that. And the owner of the house was actually a police officer. And so he had somebody come to him and say, hey, the house really stinks. It stinks when you walk by there. It smells like something's dead in there. And so he went in to check his property and found there were 3 pentagrams on the floor in the basement, and there were animal bones in the hole. Dead animals. But this hole in the wall was okay. The wall was cut for a good reason. It was to put in the ventilation system in the house. So it looks really creepy. The reason it's there makes sense if you're paying attention. But people want to make it a whole lot worse than it is. But it's dirt. So when she threw the carcasses in there, it's just laying in dirt. So when he saw that, he kicked her out, and he cited on the eviction that it was for filth. And the thing
you don't have witchcraft in your rental agreement.
Well, that is pretty nasty.
you're not allowed to have
next to me, by the way.
You can see me in
Yeah,
your picture.
he's like right here. If you
Yeah,
go,
so now you're not allowed to have Ouija boards in there. But the thing is it's as disgusting as that is, there's no law against it, but there is about the killing animals. That's
right.
not right. But at one point, sightings came back. They wanted to see what was happening in the house since the Pickmans moved out. She had agreed to let them in the house. And then when they got there, she would not let them pass the dining room door. So they were allowed in the kitchen or in the living room and dining room, but not into the kitchen. So she reneged on her agreement with them. So that was all that there was to that, So that's when it kind of fell off the face of the earth for a little while between, nobody heard anything about the Sallie House between 1994 and probably 2004.
And is that because nobody lived in the house at that time, or this lady lived there at that time?
People lived there between 1994 and 2004. The last family lived there in 2004. And the owner, he got a little irritated with people contacting him all the time and saying, I want to rent your house, but I only want to rent it for a night.
Right.
They had heard about the Valeska Axe murder house. Darwin Lynn was letting people spend the night in his haunted location, and they were doing investigations and all this other stuff. So when nobody was living there, he's like, why not? Let's see if I can make a little bit of money. And he got tired of managing that. And so that's when he turned it over to the Atchison Chamber of Commerce and said, you get half, I get half, and everybody's happy. And so, needless to say, they needed volunteers eventually, and there I am. So you worked there as a volunteer, you and your husband, and how long did you work there for? 7 years.
Wow. And what year was that? I'm trying to get Mr. Martini's picture up at the same time here. So
2017. So So this was 2017 was the last year we did it, and we started in 2010.
Okay.
So our last, one of our last things we did was film a movie there with a group that I was the liaison for, and they wanted to come in and film a movie called The Deep Darkness. And so I took them to the McIntyre Villa and to another house there called the Schisler House, and the Glick Mansion, which is directly across the street from the Sallie House. I talked to them about that. Talked to them about, the horrible flooding and tornadoes that hit up there. I mean, the town is cursed. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And then the Sallie House. So, I had to tell them everything that was the truth about the house. And so that's, luckily, I had that book, that's really thick of data that was important to me to tell them. And throughout some of this, I also used to do the trolley tours. I did a really bad job. I was horrible, but I did the trolley tours in Atchison. So that was able to get me more information into these other places. And we also did a thing called the Haunted Hop, which was the trolley tour and 2 investigations and dinner. And so, like I said, I got to get into a lot of places that a lot of people couldn't get into because of who I was.
If this is such a small town, they have trolley tours. I mean, they have that many haunted locations that they have the trolley tours. It's that haunted.
Yep, there was the trolley tour was an hour long, and we went by 24 to 29 locations. And you have to remember, there's also there is supposedly a famous person from Atchison. People know Amelia Earhart. That's where her family is from. Thing is secret, she wasn't born in Atchison, even though they say it's her birthplace. She was born in Wyandotte County, Kansas. Something else I found in my research. So, needless to say, I'm on somebody's short list. but it's it's a fact, and that's what I pride myself on is fact. I want like I said, so when I went in the Sallie House that first time, they're following these things saying, there's spirits here that are of a grown man who's got the mind of an 11-year-old. It's like, how do you know that?
Exactly. It drives me insane.
The 2 different stories had me upset, that the botched appendectomy along with the little girl that died from pneumonia. Okay. You even had Peter James.
About the mayor.
I will.
Mayor way back when,
believe me, I will. And I'm
that she made it up.
Well, there's a part of the things that people need to know is back in 1994 when all this started, when it got on TV, people were hearing about it. They started the trolley tours in 1995. And they decided that they were going to make a mint off of haunted history, and that they were going to start doing tours of the Sallie House when they could. So they actually started doing tours of the Sallie House back in 1995 when the house was empty during haunted season, if it was empty. And they still have the same trolleys too, so be careful, they're not very safe. But we slid across the seats a lot. When they turn, you just slide. It's wood. So surprised we don't have splinters in our ass. But we found out that the mayor at the time in 1995 wanted to make money off of this so bad that she made up the story because she knew a doctor had lived in that house. In fact, 2 doctors and a doctor's wife lived in that house at different times. But she knew a doctor had lived in that house, and she made up the story of the little girl dying from a botched appendectomy. Now, Barbara Connor did not know that story because she was from California. Her sister lived in Atchison, but she didn't know the story, she says. But when she walked in the house and she saw the spirit of a little girl, she assumed it was a little girl. And so it's just, and she gave it the name Sallie. I don't know where Sallie came from, But I will tell you, there was a woman named Sally, spelled Sallie.
Mm-hmm.
She may have been a patient of the doctor that lived there because he had delivered almost half the babies in town by the time he was mayor in 1914.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived, get this, she had 2 obituaries in 2 different papers. One had her living a block and a half away from them in a house on an alley, or a mile and a half away on a different street. And she was 32 years old. And she was an African-American woman who died after childbirth.
Not a little girl.
Not a little girl. So on the end of a haunting, when it said her grave, here's Sally's grave, it's abandoned and it's worn down. And you can't even tell that this little girl was, this was her grave because it's so old. And it's like bull hockey. I got, when I saw that again, after I knew more, I was so mad at all the lies that a haunting told and the city of Atchison had told. And so when we were doing tours, I told my boss at the chamber, I said, I'm not going to tell this story. I'm going to tell people that it's one of the stories that go with the house. I'm going to tell them the truth. I said, whatever truth I dig up is what I'm going to be telling them. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay. Eventually, we got a new boss at the chamber. We got fired because I wouldn't turn over.
You get fired.
Well, we quit.
I love the direction there. You're getting directions.
Is there somebody in the back seat of that car?
You're getting a backseat interviewed in your.
The thing is that year in 2017, our daughter was pregnant, our youngest daughter.
Uh-huh.
And she was going to be due during haunted season. And we had already told in March, we told them we're going to do three tours in 2017, and that's it. We're going to do September, the 3 weeks in September, basically. September 30th was our last day. And so I told them that. And after that, basically we quit. After that, I was told we were fired because I wouldn't turn over all of my documentation to them.
Why would they think that they own that?
Because they wanted to have their history guy validate all of it. And it's right in your own. So they could have it and they could basically make it theirs.
Right.
And so basically.
And not have us come back.
And not have us come back.
Which we weren't planning on going back because, well.
We weren't going back.
There was no reason to go back.
And we were burned out anyway.
No, there was no reason to go back.
And there was no reason to go back at that time. And that was because when we did that film with our friends, something happened and we did not feel any spirits there anymore.
I've had that happen to me too, where you've gone someplace and you just feel so much activity or you get so much activity and then you come back and there's like, you feel nothing and your instrumentation gets nothing. And it's like they left or.
Well, during the movie, something happened. Okay. We were not there during the eclipse. Okay. Atchison, Kansas was one of the locations of totality.
Mm-hmm.
It was raining. You couldn't hardly tell, but it was, we went all the way to night and all the way back to daytime. And we were in the house. Well, I was in the house. Ron was outside that afternoon during totality with the film crew. I was shoved down the stairs. Inside the house was so loud that you couldn't even think. Okay, this is my what I felt. That I don't know what the film crew caught because they were doing their own thing. And part of the film crew was Joe Citrone. And you guys may know him from Haunted Case Files. He's one of the paranormal survivor experts. And he also wrote 2 books about the Sallie House. One, The Sallie House, Exposing the Beast Within. And he actually filmed a pilot there for a show way back when in 2008. Swore he'd never go back. So he said he would only come back with me. So
really? Why did he swear he wouldn't go back? What, did he have that many experiences?
because of the fact that when they were there, they stayed at the Glick Mansion and investigated the Sallie House.
Mhm.
And when they did, everything was wrong. Everything. The pilot never made it to air. It broke up his friendships. The Sallie House was notorious for that, for breaking up people's friendships and their relationships.
Really?
Cause a rift with people. And so he goes, everything that happened at that house, he goes, ruined my life for a while. I don't know where any of those people are that I filmed that pilot with, he said, except for the Pickmans.
Uh-huh.
He goes, I only know where they are. And he goes, and that's only because of you. And meaning me. So needless to say, that was really hard for him to come back after he said he wasn't going to. But he called me in February before the eclipse and said, I have a film crew and we're coming at this time. And I said, that's the eclipse. I said, there is not a room to be had. I found them a house to rent. I found them everything that they needed to film this. Like I said, I was their liaison, all that. The funny thing is they want to film the end of this movie, post-mortem kind of thing.
Mhm.
And what's happened since. And nobody in Atchison will talk to them. None of the people that we previously had in the film will talk to them.
Huh.
I'm the only one that will, me and one other, and the guy that was the drone operator that I got them, are the only two that will talk to them. And you want to know why? We don't live in Atchison. And I have nothing to gain and nothing to lose. So, but the day after the eclipse, that next morning, and this is weird to say the least.
Because they were in there.
We had.
Tell them they were in there.
I will. I'm telling.
Damn it, man.
Slide on over, Mr. Pridemore.
When we left Atchison after the filming.
We're not gonna know what you're talking about.
So we left, we got ice cream, got stuck in traffic coming home. The weather got bad. And when I say bad, because it got hot and cold and it was in August, we ended up with rain, hail, flooding, all kinds of stuff because of the eclipse. And so we get home and we're exhausted. Okay, that's normal. The Sallie House exhausts you. And so we go to bed and the next morning we get up. Well, not really. I'm woke up by this really bright light in my bedroom. And it's not the sun because it was raining. It was dark. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm woke up by all this chattering and this bright light in my bedroom. Okay, I don't know what happened at the Sallie House after 3 o'clock that afternoon because we had left. I look over and I see this group of people in my bedroom, in my hallway, chattering. And and they're all from the Sallie House, okay?
Uh-huh.
I've seen them all there in the past, but they're all spirits. And this woman that I recognized this woman from the house. Her name was Agnes Finney True. She lived in the house from the time it was built to the time she died, okay? She tells me goodbye and thank you. And they all leave, okay? We go back on September 9th, and I'm going, well, they said goodbye. I guess, I don't know if they're still there or not. I'm assuming that I was brought to that house to help them cross over.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew why I was there, why I was obsessed with it, or anything like that. I just knew that it felt different. Every time before we would go to the Sallie House, I would have a visit from a spirit from the Sallie House telling me something that was going to happen. Every time. Never failed. I did not this time. I would have you'd walk in the house and there's this horrible smell.
It's a musty smell.
Mildew, and
the bugs were gone.
I mean, there were bugs every time.
In the basement, year round, gone. We use the Echo Box all the time there.
No activity.
Got tons of activity every
In the
time
past.
we went in there. The thing was absolutely dead for those 3 weekends we were there after that. It was so boring. I said, I'm not doing this. This is a waste of time.
So, needless to say, it changed. And there was a big change. Now, recently, people have been investigating there again. And they're saying that they're getting activity. The thing is that I'm going to tell them, those are newly conjured spirits that are there.
Right.
The portal in the house was closed. And from what we can tell, okay, from when we were in there last, it felt totally different. I did not feel a portal in that house. There were 5 portals in that house. Didn't feel a thing for those whole 3 weeks that we were there. Did it change? Yeah, it did. But the thing is all these people that were still going there, being told that it was haunted, are still going in there and calling out for the doctor, for Sally. And a spirit, if it wants to get attention, it's going to get it. So, but whatever was in there before that used to scratch me. Yeah, and so it used to beat the living crap out of me all the time. I mean, I had folding chairs thrown across the room at me. And the reason that I spell Sally, Sally, and I say I spelled it Salle, it's because that's the way it's always been spelled. And I don't know who gave her that spelling of her name.
Yeah, it's different. I've never seen it spelled that way before. I actually thought it was somebody's last name because of the way it was spelled.
The people that own the house, that actually built the house, was Finney, Finney.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really strange is that some of the family members are still alive in Washington State. And I don't know if they knew that their great-grandfather and their grandfather are being called such bad names. That's why I think that I was drawn there, was to tell the truth, to get people to understand that Dr. Finney wasn't a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
He saved people's lives. He didn't kill people. He wasn't a molester. He might have been more he might have been a cross-dresser. He might have been a little bit more feminine than people, accepted now, maybe not accepted then, because when he died in 1947, things weren't as accepted as they are now. And, but he used to dress up like a woman for a lot of different things. He was a female ice skater. I got all kinds of stories about him dressing up like a woman and going out in public. In high school,
in a small town like Atkinson, Kansas, is, it's not a place that you're accepted, unfortunately.
And a doctor. And then, like I said, and then he was mayor. And that's what I would make people do. I would make them think. I would go, if this man had actually killed a little girl because of, malpractice, do you think he would have been named mayor in 1914?
Exactly. These stories that come out of these places, and when we go to these places, I want to know the real history. I do a lot of research, and because I don't want to talk to somebody when I'm doing the spirit box and things like that it's just some made up fable, that somebody's made up along the lines. Going back to the Shining, the Stanley Hotel, they tell the story of Lord Dunraven, and that he haunts 401, room 401. And Lord Dunraven did exist. He was a lord that lived in Ireland, actually, and he had a beautiful castle in Ireland. Very rich man. And he used to come to Estes Park to hunt. And so because he wasn't a United States citizen, he couldn't get land through, the land grab at the late 1800s. So he would hire American citizens and kind of do a shell company to grab this free land. And he grabbed a bunch of land throughout Estes Park so he could hunt. And he built a hunting lodge down by the gates of Rocky Mountain National Park, and which doesn't exist anymore. But when they finally, the U.S. government caught on what he was doing, he had to give the land back. And so the story that the hotel says is that he haunts this room because he's bitter that he had to give his land back. And it's like, really? Why would he haunt this one room? This hotel didn't even exist when all this happened. Mm-hmm. And he's got this castle back in Ireland. Wouldn't he be haunting that instead of room 401 in the Stanley Hotel that didn't exist when he was alive? I mean, just nothing makes sense. But there is a spirit in that room, but I don't think it's him. I think it's somebody, a spirit pretending, when somebody goes in there with a K2 and says, "Are you Lord Dunraven?" and it lights up. He's like, "Yeah, sure, I'm Lord Dunraven."
Right. The spirit wants to talk. If the spirit wants to talk, it's going to talk. It does not care if you're calling him George or Lily. They're going to answer, and they're going to do whatever it is they want. And one of the things I saw was somebody had said that they think that they should burn down the Sallie House. You don't want to know how many times I've heard that, but I think it would make it worse, because I think there's something with the land in Atkinson. And if any of you watch the Ghost Adventures episode, I'm the one that tells them that I see a Native American in the yard all the time. And of course, they show a Cherokee Indian, and it's a Kaw Indian. They didn't get their history right.
Right. That happens a lot.
Again, it doesn't matter. I got so much crap for saying Indian, and I'm going, hey, people, I'm Blackfoot and Cherokee. If I can't say Indian, nobody can. And I also want to say the Washington Redskins need to go back to their name. I'm very proud. Like I said, I'm a proud Indian, and I used to be a Redskins fan. I'm not anymore. I'm also not a Ravens fan anymore either. And no NFL. Nope, no more NFL.
Well, we're from Colorado. We're definitely not Ravens fans.
Yes, I know. I got yelled at in the airport.
You don't have a football team either.
Yeah, Ron's gone because you don't have a football team either. But
oh my God, it's just like you're driving us nuts.
Remember when Denver played Baltimore in the World Series and the Super Bowl?
Yes. So we don't like them.
I was in the airport there because I was working. I work for CenturyLink. And I was there doing some stuff, and I had shingles. I was sick as heck. And I'm going to the airport, and I've got on a Ravens sweatshirt because I had one. And so I went and I wore that, and I had people yelling nasty names at me all the way through the airport. And I mean, I was in tears, not because of because I was hurting, but it just didn't help any. So it was kind of weird, but at least the people in Littleton treated me nice with my Ravens sweatshirt on.
Be glad it wasn't a Patriots shirt, because you should see what happens when somebody wears a Patriots shirt around here. But, it's the Patriots are our biggest rival.
Well, you didn't hear there's no game tomorrow with the Chiefs and the Patriots because Cam Newton is positive.
Oh, I didn't see that. I have been so busy all day. I haven't watched the news all day. And
it rolled across the bottom. It rolled across the bottom of the Preakness, and the Preakness ran in my hometown of Baltimore today. So my husband was watching the Preakness, and he goes, "Oh, there's no Chiefs game tomorrow." But we live in Kansas City, so Chiefs are a big deal here. So I won't wear red on game day just to protest football.
I've given up on football for the whole season. We're very big. We're big college football fans, and especially University of Colorado, because that's right down the street. And I actually work for the University of Colorado, and so we're big Buffalo fans. Buffs, we call them here. And we are season ticket holders. And just not being able to go to a game this year has been, it's like it's not fall to us.
Yeah, I hope that you guys are still shut down a lot in Colorado.
It depends on what you're talking about. The University of Colorado Boulder, the kids are on lockdown right now because they just wouldn't stop partying and getting together. And it went from a very low number of COVID to like 600 plus cases very quickly.
So you had
so they all were ordered, for lack of a better word, to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. So they've been taking classes from their dorm rooms and their apartments and stuff.
And probably still partying.
And they're still partying.
Yeah, and I can, and the people of Boulder were mad because this is their community, and they were not respecting what was going on. So, and now they're talking about starting the Pac-12 again. I think, didn't they already? This is, you should be part of this conversation, Mr. Martini. I've been trying to get him on this whole time. I keep sending him links, and for some reason he can't seem to get on, but he's right next to me. But yeah, they've been trying to get the Pac-12 going, and that's been kind of sputtering, hasn't it?
Next month.
Next month they start.
No, I think they've got a date set for it, but I don't know what the date.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they have a date set for it. So
Like November 6th.
November 6th, my husband says he thinks it's about that time. So, but again,
Yeah, 8 feet of snow by then.
yeah, they'll get 4 games in, and
We're having very unseasonable weather here. It's actually been really warm, which is unfortunate because we have a lot of forest fires going on, and we need moisture really, really bad. We're all told to stay in today because the smoke's so bad.
The hills are alive.
well, I know that when we were driving to Vegas,
Is it fires in Colorado or the ones from California?
is it the
We're getting both smoke.
Colorado, California smoke?
We're getting both.
Both.
So there's one at the third, it's probably the second largest now, fire of Colorado's history going on just north of us in Fort Collins.
Oh yeah.
And we're about a half hour from Fort Collins. And he's got martinis.
Why it wouldn't be a show without it?
Let me see if I can play with the screens to see if we can get him in here. There you go, Mr. Martini.
Well, when we were going to Vegas we went to Vegas over Labor Day weekend. Well, not over. I mean, we were there over a week, but we were driving through, and my husband goes, well, if it's going to be 114 degrees, we need to think about taking the north route through, taking I-70 through Colorado. And I said, we can't, the road's closed.
Yeah.
He goes, why? I said, the forest fire is still going on. And they had finally gotten the road back opened, but it was only one lane, and they were having, really long delays because it was only one lane getting through, and they were stopping for helicopters and things like that to bring in supplies. So it's like, okay, well, and the weather broke, and it was 36 degrees in Gallup, New Mexico on our way back. So
yeah, it's been unseasonably warm here. It's been like in the high 80s and 90s, which is very warm. But yet we had snow 3 weeks ago.
Right, that was when we were coming back from Vegas. And so I told my husband, I said, we can't go back that way now because it's going to snow. And that was the day it was 36 in Gallup in the morning. So
yeah, that's the thing. At night, it's really, really cold. It gets down in the 30s here. My tomatoes will tell you that. And because my tomatoes all have the freezer burn on it.
What you don't realize is that you're also in altitude. So
yeah, we're at 50. What are we at?
Like
5,800 feet where we're at. I mean, you come into Denver and you don't realize that you're in altitude. People get altitude sickness all the time. That's why when you watch our videos, I'm always preaching, drink water, you're in altitude.
You look over at the mountains and you think you're a flatlander, but the mountains are a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, like Estes Park, where the Stanley Hotel is, that is 7,800 feet.
Yeah, we stayed in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and that was 7,400 feet.
Love that place.
Yep, we stayed at the Plaza Hotel there.
Oh, yeah, we have a video. We have a paranormal video on the Plaza Hotel. We love it there.
Okay, here's what happened. We were downstairs, and because of social distancing and stuff, the hotel was only half full. And I don't think it was half full, but they were only taking half of the hotel. So we're standing there and we're talking to the guy who checked us in. He was the night manager, the evening manager. And where we're standing there talking to him, I'm taking some pictures. Ron's talking, I'm taking pictures, just checking stuff out. And this man walks by me, and well, as he walks by me, he pinches my shoulder and then goes into the bar that was closed. And Ron goes, "Did you see him?" Because I told him, I said, "I just got pinched." And I turned and I looked, and of course I saw him. And he goes, "Well, what did he look like?" I said, "He looked like him."
On the picture, one of the pictures on the wall?
One of the picture in the bar.
Oh, who?
And that's what
was the picture?
Yep.
Who was it?
I forgot his name. I'll have to go look it up.
What happened to me there? I love the Plaza Hotel. For those of you watching, if you're ever in Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada.
Yeah, you'll be disappointed if you're thinking Nevada.
Yes, it's New Mexico, and it's about an hour out of Santa Fe. So, like, if you're driving from Santa Fe to Denver, you'll go right through Las Vegas. And the Plaza Hotel is this amazing old historic hotel, and it's considered very haunted. And what a lot of people don't realize about New Mexico is that there's a lot of filming that goes on there. So, if you're a Longmire fan, Longmire, not a stitch of it was filmed in Wyoming, which is where Longmire is supposed to take place. It's all in New Mexico. And matter of fact, we've even got a video on the filming location there. And literally, you've got the Plaza Hotel here, and you have I can never say it, the county, Abscarosa.
Don't ask me to do that shit. I'm not going there. The
sheriff's office, Longmire Sheriff's Office, is literally
I can read it.
Is on the other corner. And it says, Sheriff's Office, Wyoming, Wyoming. And because they did all the filming in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and they all stayed in this hotel. So every time they do a movie, they love doing movies, especially Westerns in Las Vegas, New Mexico.
That's because the town hasn't changed in 100 years. Because it hasn't
changed. It's gone through a lot of economic. I know who that is. That is
the original owner of the hotel.
I know exactly who that is. Oh my God, there's something about him too. I have it in my notes about the hotel, and I'm going to have to look it up. Gosh, no, it's bugging me. I know who that is. That picture, there's something about that picture too. When I figure it out, I'll text it to you, but I can't remember what it is. Show that picture again. Show Mr. Martin.
This is
that's the original owner, and he's supposed to be haunting 301 at the Plaza Hotel.
But like I said, he walked past me, pinched my arm as he was walking past me, and walked into the bar. And the bar was closed. Okay, because of.
Yeah, not for him.
Spirits need spirits.
Speaking of spirits, Mr. Martini made me a lemon drop martini, because this is what we used to do in our lives. Is Mr. Martini would make martinis, and this is a lemon drop. How did you make
Maybe
this?
You should say live events.
Live events. What did I say?
This is what we do in our lives.
But the Plaza, so many movie stars and TV stars stay in the hotel while they're filming in the area. They film from Las Vegas to Santa Fe. There's just the list goes on and on of how much filming goes on in this area. And one of the reasons that so much filming goes on is that a lot of things are locked in time, but the way they look, and New Mexico gives incentives to Hollywood to come to New Mexico. They give them tax breaks, and it's very economical for them to come and film in New Mexico, and they're very welcome there. And so the state actually gives them money to come. They give them this tax rebates. And I know that because I used to work for New Mexico State in the New Mexico Finance Authority. And that's why I know so much about New Mexico. We still live there. And anyways, so they all stay in this hotel, and they stay in the suites, and they have pictures. I don't know if you saw that, Denise, that they had pictures of the different movie stars that stayed in these rooms. Like they have the Longmire stayed in this one, and
I like
Blue
John
Diamond
Carpenter's room.
So John Carpenter's room. So
he filmed vampires there.
The movie Vampires. So I'm walking around. I'm not doing a paranormal investigation. I'm just filming the hotel from my Longmire video. So I'm going up to each room, showing Lou Diamond Phillips. This was his room, and showing the picture that's up on the door, and then going on to the next one. I get to the John Carpenter room and I say, okay, this is John Carpenter's room. He stayed here when he filmed vampires. And then I go on to the next. So later on that night, I go back to the room and we're staying in one of these suites. Mm-hmm. And I decide to review my footage. I always review my footage. And I'm listening with the headphones on. And all of a sudden, when I go, this is the John Carpenter room, I hear a hello. And I'm in that hallway all by myself. There is absolutely nobody in that hallway around me. And it was as somebody went up right up to my camera and went, hello. And you hear it as clear as day.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
They added on to the hotel by buying the building next door, right?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Well, we stayed in the James Woods room 203.
No, we've stayed in the Almost. What's his name? James Almost.
James Edward Almost.
Yes, yeah. We stayed in his room. He filmed No Country for No Men.
Yeah,
old men.
Man, you butchered that one. Yeah, that movie.
Yeah, I walked through and I took pictures of all the artwork in the hotel. I didn't take pictures of all the different rooms. I was only worried about what room I was staying in, because when we got there, they didn't have they wanted to put us in a suite because they didn't have any of the other rooms clean, and they only charged us $79. I was happy. I didn't care. And so we were overlooking the plaza, the park there, and it was nice. We walked down and had a nice meal at a Mexican restaurant, a new Mexican restaurant.
It is my favorite place to stay. And it's not that expensive. I would, when I go and stay at the Plaza Hotel, I would just stay in the hotel the whole time I'm there because I just love that hotel. Oh, look who's here. Down the Rabbit Hole Travel. Down the Rabbit Hole Travel is one of our oldest friends on YouTube. And if you guys have never checked out Down the Rabbit Hole Travels, she's wonderful. And she used to come into our lives along with JD Knight 7. They remember our old lives where, hey, look, Marty, we're still up to our old trips.
What's up, Wabbit?
Now, Marty is great. Down the Rabbit Hole. Definitely check her out. So anyways, the Plaza Hotel, I had another experience there that night. So I reviewed my footage. And actually, it was the second night. So when we heard somebody say hello to me on the footage, I'm like, oh, we're doing a paranormal investigation. Let's pull out the equipment. We always take it with us. And so that night, we were going to have the motion detector. We have a night vision camera that just will come on if something moves in the room. So I turned it on facing us on the bed.
Which is scary by itself.
That could get you in a lot of trouble.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Two old people in bed. But
as long as you're sleeping, it's okay.
We don't want to scare anybody. That's paranormal in itself. But we, unfortunately, sadly, we had lost our dog like 7-8 days prior to that. We were on a 10-day tour of New Mexico. So this was the last leg of our trip. But the first day of this 10-day journey through New Mexico, our dog fell out of the car. She was very old, and she hurt herself so bad we had to put her down in Santa Fe. And which was kind of ironic because when we lived in Santa Fe, she was alive. She was that old. And so it was kind of like come home, kind of a full circle thing for her. And so we had to put her down and then go on our 10-day journey. It was horrible. And so this was the last leg of our trip, and we had the other dog with us. And that's another thing that's neat about the Plaza in Las Vegas, New Mexico, is you can take your dog. Even in these suites.
Yeah, they had in fact, the guy that checked us in, he lived there and he was walking his dogs the next morning when we saw him.
He lived in the hotel?
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know anybody lived there.
No.
So anyways, so our dog had passed, and we were about an hour from Santa Fe, being at the plaza, and it was the middle of the night. I had this camera rolling, but the camera its battery got drained, which happens to us quite a bit. It turned on, it was full battery, and it just turned off. I think it was actually plugged in, wasn't it?
It didn't last long.
Yeah. And so we didn't have any footage. But in the middle of the night, something woke me up. And so I lifted up my head like somebody was moving around in the room, and I kind of sat up and I looked around and nobody was there. I looked, and our other dog was asleep on his bed across the room, fast asleep. And so I laid down and tried to go back to sleep. And I was laying on my back, and all of a sudden I felt like a nose went between my feet, like it pushed down between my feet, like it was a dog's nose. And so I sat up real quick and I looked across the room, and the other dog was still fast asleep. And of course, Lady, who the dog that we had to put down was not with us, or was she?
Ghost dog.
Ghost dog. And I've had that happen to me twice, where I feel like an animal that we had to put down has visited me right after they passed, like they were saying goodbye, and then they never visited me again. I had a cat do that, and then I really feel that Lola came and said goodbye to me, and it was bizarre. I mean, something pushed down between my feet, as clear as day. I was wide awake at the time, and it was bizarre. And so those are the two experiences I had in that hotel. I mean, that hotel is haunted.
I'll tell you, after we left there, we went over to check out the La Castaneda.
Oh God, it's awesome.
But because of COVID, we couldn't walk in and just check it out. But we walked around it and took some pictures and things like that. So the next time we go that way, so what we did is we went from Kansas City to Dodge City, Kansas, to Las Vegas, New Mexico. So basically, we followed the trail of a whole lot of old movies and TV shows, basically going that route, because a lot of the old Westerns were filmed about Dodge City, in Dodge City, as well as, Las Vegas, New Mexico, and Gallup, New Mexico. So we went what was weird was a couple of the different actors were people that had a star on their walk in Dodge City, had a room at the Plaza Hotel, also had a room at the El Rancho Hotel, or had their picture on the wall there for something that they had filmed there in New Mexico. It was just so strange that we were following all these actors without even knowing it. So it was really interesting. But have you guys ever been to the El Rancho Hotel?
No, but I've been to the I can never say it, Costa. You say the name of the
Castaneda?
Castaneda. I have the hardest time saying it for some reason. So the Castaneda, if I'm saying it correctly, Castaneda.
I'm not even going to try.
For some reason, I don't know why I have problems saying it. Whole time I was at the plaza, I had a hard time. The people that own the plaza own that. And that hotel or that building sits right on the Santa Fe tracks.
Is that the Harvey House?
It's the Harvey House. It's an old Harvey House.
If you just said Harvey House, I didn't know exactly what you're talking about. I'm telling the
story. So it sits right on the tracks, and it was an old Harvey House hotel that's being redone. The man who owns the plaza owns that, and he also owns, oh God, what's it called in Winslow? The big hotel in Winslow.
Yeah, doesn't he own that one too? He owns that one in Winslow, and he owns another one near Albuquerque, or in Albuquerque.
Yeah, he loves old Harvey hotels, and he buys them and redoes them, and is bringing them back to life. So the one that we're talking about on the tracks has been empty for almost 70 years. And here's a piece of history just deteriorating and deteriorating. And, he's coming in and redoing these. So I ask everybody to stay at these places because, these hotels have really, they've brought history alive again. Ghost Adventures actually went in there right before they opened it up and, and did an episode in there. And then they came in and totally redid it. So one half was redone and then the other half is being redone right now. And then the Harvey girls slept across the street in a dorm. And a friend of ours a lawyer owns that, and his family has owned that building for like decades, right? For decades. And so last time we were there, we were taking pictures of the dorm, the Harvey girl dorm, and he's converting it into an apartment building. And
very challenging.
Yeah, that had really gotten run down. It had gone through 3 generations of his family, and it just had been empty forever. And he was redoing the whole thing. And he gave us a complete tour of it. I've never put that video out yet. I have it all on film walking through that. And he said that it was really haunted. The Harvey girl dorm across the street, that he's had a lot of activity there. And he was great. He was giving
the most amazing thing I found out about that house was that they had all those Harvey girls there and they only had one bathroom.
They were always on time for work. What's really neat about all this is that
as he's converting it into apartments, he's got to add a bathroom for every apartment. What a nightmare.
Well, we have a Harvey house in Leavenworth, Kansas. That is the Harvey House Museum. And they do paranormal investigations there.
Well, there's another Harvey House Museum in New Mexico. It's in Belen, which is, if you've never been to it, is south of Albuquerque. And it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And especially if you're there at Christmas time, they fill the whole place with Christmas trees and with all different decorations. And it's just a beautiful place to go in and take pictures. And this particular Harvey house that became a museum in Belen was one of the lunch rooms, the Harvey House lunch rooms. And then the girls slept upstairs in the dorm. It was a dormitory upstairs. And so it wasn't a hotel like the others were. And if you guys don't know what we're talking about, Harvey houses. So when the Santa Fe Topeka Railroad opened, coming from,
you didn't say that right. It's
what?
It's the Atchison Topeka Santa Fe.
Back
to the Sallie House. So, and that's Atchison, Kansas. So, see, that's where it started. Is where we started this interview.
Exactly. I didn't realize that until you just said that. So where the Sallie House is, where we started this interview, that the railroad started, came all the way into Santa Fe and onward. And they were out in the middle of nowhere during this time. I mean, you'll probably remember the movie. Some of you might remember the movie with Julie Garland, The Harvey Girls. Is about these houses. And so Harvey built hotels and lunchrooms along the route of this train, all the way from Atchison, all the way, through Arizona. And matter of fact, some very famous buildings that are at the Grand Canyon, one of the main buildings there was a Harvey house. And so he had excursions. You could get off the train in the middle of nowhere, and they would have cars waiting for you, and they would take you out to the middle of nowhere.
Cars are like stagecoaches.
It's kind of both. Because, this was like,
modern travel,
1900s on. And, I think the last Harvey house closed like in the 1960s. And so you could stop and have lunch. So you get off the train in the middle of nowhere and go to these lunch rooms and have lunch. And you had 30 minutes, you'd pre-order, they'd telegraph your order in. By the time you got to the lunchroom, your lunch was there. And so these Harvey girls would come from all over the United States to work at these places to get out of their small towns because, women didn't have careers back then. And this was a way for them to leave their small little towns. And so becoming a Harvey girl was a big deal. And they always wore these black, outfits with white aprons. And then when they would get more into the Southwest, it would get a little more Southwestern looking. And so a lot of these buildings are very decrepit now, and they haven't been occupied for some of them for 80 years. Mm-hmm. And this hotel that we're talking about that's right on the tracks, it was vacant for 70 years, and it's an absolutely gorgeous building. And this man who owns the Plaza Hotel in New Mexico has been redoing these buildings and making them into hotels. And they're just marvelous. They're gorgeous.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time, they were the number one employer of women in the nation.
Yes.
One of the things here in Kansas City at Union Station, which is the train station, there's Harvey's. It's actually used to have the Harvey girls who used to be the waitresses at that place. So just here in Kansas City, downtown Kansas City. Still open to this day, this restaurant.
Yeah, there's some of the buildings are still occupied. When we were doing that 10-day trek through New Mexico, I passed one of the Harvey houses and didn't realize it. And I actually stopped and paused and looked at it and said, gosh, that looks like one of the lunch rooms. And we were in the middle of nowhere where we were on our way to Billy the Kid's grave, which is in the middle of nowhere. And
that's another venture altogether.
Yeah, that's a whole nother venture. So we were kind of on this venture to go find Billy the Kid's grave. And we passed this building right on the tracks. And I was like, God, that looks like a lunchroom from the Harvey days. And I was really disappointed when I found out it was. And I drove right past it and didn't get any pictures or go investigate it. But it was pretty abandoned. And it was kind of sad because it was so rich with history. And nobody was taking care of it. And I'm trying to remember where that was. It was like in northeast New Mexico, just outside of Fort Sumner.
That's what it says. Old Fort Sumner Cemetery.
Yeah, that's where Billy is. And then the Harvey House lunchroom is just outside of that. And I want to say it starts with a V. I can't remember what it's called.
The thing is, we followed him too. Billy the Kid. He was all over our trip too. So
I love New Mexico. We love it so much that we're actually moving back to Santa Fe when we retire.
Well, it's probably better for retirement to live there because of the tax-free, you don't have any income tax.
Yeah, and we won't be working anymore.
But you still have income tax on your 401ks when you withdraw. It's income.
Yes, that's right.
That's why we're looking at Alabama, because they don't tax Social Security or some other things. So we got to look at that stuff. Kansas is the worst state, one of the worst states, because they tax your Social Security and they tax your other income at 10%, at least.
That's good to know. Because I didn't realize that. Yeah,
every state's different.
My mother's Social Security, because she was living with us here in Colorado, and they weren't taxing her here.
Yeah, Kansas does. So it's something that you have to look at when you're thinking about relocating for the end of the rest of your life, because that's what we're looking at. It says that Kansas is one of the least friendly retirement states. You wouldn't think so. So at least you guys are not looking at Kansas. My daughter used to live in Red River.
Oh, I know Red River very well. They have a huge Harley rally there.
I would call it more of a motorcycle rally, but
a
lot of Harleys do show up.
Oh, okay.
We used to work at the visitor center.
Red River?
Yep.
I drugged my wife to one of those said rallies one year.
We were a lot younger than I could ride a motorcycle.
Not that much younger. But.
Well, New Mexico is a wonderful place. There's just so much history. I don't think it gets as much credit as it deserves.
It is different in so many parts. The state's so different as you bounce around the state.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, that's the thing, is that we're moving there because the winters are getting hard here in Colorado for us. And they get winters there because it's actually an altitude in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and Santa Fe. It's actually higher than where we're at. It's in the 7,000s. And a lot of people don't realize that it's 7,000 feet, and you don't realize how high up you really are. And but their winters aren't as hard. They don't get as much snow. But you can literally get in your car and drive south and be in the desert, in a heartbeat. And that's what makes it really nice.
Yeah, Albuquerque's not that far, and neither is any place else, really. I mean, Grants ain't that far when it comes right down to it. From where we live, it's far. I want to check out Tucumcari next time. The Blue Swallow Hotel.
Oh, yes. Oh, and then what's the other one? That's outside of, it's not in town.
Does it have a bar?
They all have bars. We'll bring our own bar. The one that's outside between Santa Fe and Taos, it's supposed to be the most haunted hotel in all of New Mexico. And
I don't remember. I know that I was looking at stuff when I was telling my husband where we were staying on this trip. And because I told him, this trip we were going a different route because we didn't want to go through, Tucumcari this time.
Right.
It's all 2-lane roads. It's dangerous. There's so many ghost towns coming from Wichita to I-40. So that's why we decided to go through Dodge City and see some different parts. And so I had already picked the hotels that we were staying at in New Mexico.
Okay. Well, it's the St. James, by the way. I Googled it. The St. James Hotel.
Oh, okay.
The most haunted hotel in New Mexico.
Oh, yeah. I remember that was on Ghost Adventures.
Says who?
It says everybody.
They have a room there that's
say so.
It's locked. It's padlocked, and they don't let anybody stay there. And I believe that Jesse James also went there. I'm not.
Yes,
don't quote me on that.
Rumor
but
has it.
Yeah. Well, okay. I have a story about Jesse James in New Mexico and Billy. Okay. So Jesse, he was hiding for a while. After his whole, that he did with his brother and his gang, and they went into hiding for quite some time. And then they wanted to come out of hiding and kind of stuff they were doing. He didn't want to come on board. He, had a family. He just wanted to live a normal life. So Jess was trying to build a gang the second round, and he get in on board. So he came to New Mexico allegedly, and stayed at the same time talking about. But he came to Las Vegas, New Mexico, which was a very prosperous, very rough and tumble town at the time. Now it's, doesn't do very well. Back in the day, it was the town back in the 1800s. So he went to a saloon, which I've actually got pictures of where the saloon used to be. I have so much footage I haven't put out yet. All the places and stories. So he goes to the saloon in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and he meets a young man there named Billy and tries to talk Billy into joining his gang, and Billy turned him down. And this story comes from one of Billy's very close friends, whose name's escaping me right now, but he was part of Billy's gang. He was one of his closest. He's one of them that was killed with him. Anyways, when he wasn't killed with him, he was interviewed years later telling the story, and the story was so exact that I'm sure it was exaggerated. And he's telling how Billy met Justice Bar in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and how he turned into it. And so the story actually has a little Billy. because and when it was told and who it was told to. And a lot of people don't know the story. James and Billy the Kid actually one time and almost went into business. Billy turned him down, and the rest is history.
We think we're having an audio problem.
Are we having an audio problem?
Yeah, we can hear you, but it's coming in and out. So I think you're buffering because I can see you guys are coming in and out on the video a little bit.
No, some shit. Maybe it'll help. Internet dragging.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Which Denise? I'm Denise also. So did anybody hear that story at all?
I heard parts of it, but it was choppy.
Nobody died. Billy didn't shoot anything.
Can you hear me okay now? Tell us in the chat. Can you hear us okay now?
Shut your internet off.
No, this is not on the internet, this one. Can you guys hear us okay?
Damn it, man.
Okay.
The crystals are dissolved and I can't bring up the internet.
Sometimes on StreamYard, if a lot of different devices are on at the same time, it kind of drains your Wi-Fi if you're on Wi-Fi. If you're hardwired, it works better.
Well, give me a second, okay? You may lose me for a second, so give me a second.
Okay.
Is that better?
Well, you sound better, but you're not moving.
Now am I?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, and you're clear too. So that's it.
We have a 5G network and a
two.
2.4 network. We're actually on fiber optics here. We actually have like the best internet you could possibly have. Our whole town does.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's owned by the town.
Yeah.
And it cost us like $39 for the rest of our life. They never raised the rate.
So it's not CenturyLink?
No.
No.
Or that's right. We're Lumen.
It's owned by the city. They
It's owned
call
by the
themselves what? Netlight or some shit?
Yeah, but sometimes at night, I was on 5G, and sometimes at night, so many people get on it that it drags, and I just need to switch over to the 2.4G, and then that way everything's good.
It's probably the daughter in the next room watching a movie over her, handheld or some shit like that.
So did you hear the Jesse James, Billy the Kid story at all?
Only parts of it.
We can give you the Reader's Digest recap if you like, but
so basically, Jesse James was rebuilding his gang to have a second run of, his criminal activities. He came to Las Vegas, New Mexico, came to this bar in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and met up with Billy the Kid and tried to recruit him
for his gang
that he was trying to rebuild. And Billy turned him down. And
the bank robbing ain't his thing.
So stories about Jesse being at the St. James at Cinnarron. What's it? Cinnarron? What's that town?
I've been drinking. Don't ask me that shit.
It is very plausible. And the story that he met up with Billy in this bar, I know exactly where the bar used to stand. I've taken video and pictures of where it is in Las Vegas, New Mexico, existed. And the person who told this story was one of Billy's gang years later to a reporter. And so it came from a very reliable source. And the details whose name's escaping me, who told the story that Billy and Jesse James met up in Las Vegas, New Mexico. His detail was so exact that historians believe that the story's true, that they really did meet up in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And a lot of people don't know that story. That's it in a nutshell.
I will tell you, Jesse James follows us everywhere. We stayed at the 1792 Talbot Tavern in Bardstown, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
He shot up a room there. Also, very haunted hotel. And we live not far from Kearney, where his birthplace. We live not far from St. Joseph, Missouri, his supposed death place. Let's see, the bunch of these hotels that we stayed at on this trip, of course. And his brother used to stay at this location that we investigated in Smithville, Missouri, and used to shoot off the cap. Well, it wasn't a cap gun; it was a real gun for the horse races that used to happen in Smithville, Missouri, back in the day. And Frank was one of the Quantrill's raiders. And then this other place we investigated, Jesse broke Frank out of jail at the 1859 jail in Independence, Missouri. So Jesse James dots everything out here in Kansas and Missouri.
Not around.
He's not around a little bit. So,
well, he wouldn't rob banks in his hometown. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, everybody knew him, and they'd tell his mother, and his mother would probably spend. So, but there's all kinds of stories around here about Jesse James, especially when they dug up the grave that they said was his. So that story's all over out here. In fact, it happened about the time we moved to Kansas, or about the time we moved to Missouri. We had lived in Kansas, then we moved to Missouri, and then now we're back in Kansas. But
you mean they disturbed his grave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they disturbed somebody's grave.
Yeah, they were trying to prove that was him in the grave.
Were they able to prove it?
I don't remember. Were they?
I think that they proved it was him.
Yeah. Well, they won't let him dig Billy the Kid up because they could very easily match DNA with his mother. They know where she's buried as well, but the town won't let them do it
because this is in the middle of nowhere, and if you prove that that's not Billy the Kid,
nobody's stopping there.
There's a lot of those types of stories out there where people say that this person is buried there. It's like, if you remember back when they were looking for the grave of Christopher Columbus, they still have never proved where he's at, but they're not going to do any DNA testing on anybody that they say is him buried there, because this is what they have. It's like Atchison. If I go around telling everybody that Amelia Earhart wasn't born there, it could hurt their commerce.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's why they won't test. I mean, even the governor of New Mexico was involved in testing Billy the Kid's DNA in this grave. And, and because they were asking for a pardon for him also. And, but the town wouldn't let him dig him up. And they know exactly where his mother's buried in Silver City, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. Her grave has always been well marked. Matter of fact, her original headstone is in Lincoln, which is where the Lincoln County Wars occurred, with the regulators and stuff. And they have her headstone, her original wood headstone, in the museum there. And then they gave her a new one. And so they know exactly where Billy's mom is. And, he wasn't a orphan all the way, not until she passed. And they just take her DNA and the DNA on the grave.
She actually outlived her son, didn't she?
No, she died.
Did she?
No. That's why he became a criminal, is because she died and he just had nobody taking care of him.
A derelict, but
he became a derelict, because his mother passed and he had nobody taking care of him. And he became a cattle rustler, and that's how the whole thing started. And, now they're finding out that he wasn't the criminal that everybody thinks he is, that it was actually the people around him, and he just was the fall guy. And,
once a duck, always a duck. You kind of are who you hang out with. I mean, that's what we tell our kids, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he kept bad company, and he got the blame for it.
Well, it's kind of ironic. So if that really is his grave, he's buried, about 50, 75 feet away from a guy he killed?
Yeah. So you go into the graveyard.
Love to hear that conversation at night.
I have a whole video on this.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Billy.
So you go to the graveyard, and a lot of the headstones are gone because there was a huge flood back in the early 1900s that took all the headstones away, and they never replaced them. But there's actually some very famous people that were involved in the history of New Mexico, the building of New Mexico, like the Maxwell family. They're all buried there. And that's who's Billy's where Billy was. He was at Peter Maxwell's house, which is right behind the graveyard. And Peter was the son of a very famous New Mexico pioneer by the last name of Maxwell. I can't remember his first name.
Yeah, and they had bought the old Fort
Yeah.
Sumter, after the military abandoned it.
Right.
So when you see in the movies Billy's at Fort Sumter, it really was a fort, but it wasn't controlled by the military in any way, shape, or form.
No, the Maxwells did. Matter of fact, when you drive through New Mexico, especially Las Vegas in that area, you'll see the Maxwell name quite a bit because the Maxwells owned that whole area around Las Vegas. And then they bought Fort Sumter and moved there. They were a very wealthy Hispanic family. And, because they were part of Mexico before it became the United States. And then when it became the United States, they became United States citizens. Anyway, so he was at Peter Maxwell's house when he got shot by Pat Garrett.
Or did he?
That's a whole nother story. And buried that's why he's at this graveyard. And so he's buried there with his two friends that got shot that day. And they're in a cage because his headstone's been stolen twice now. And I would say 20 yards from him is a headstone that says, I can't remember the guy's name, so-and-so shot by Billy the Kid. And he's like 20 yards from Billy the Kid.
Yeah, that's really not that uncommon. There's the Bill Cemetery in Kentucky, in Pikeville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Pikeville, Kentucky is the home of the Hatfields and McCoys. The Hatfields and McCoys are buried in the same graveyard.
Love to see that conversation at night.
I'd like to hear that spirit box conversation.
I made my husband take me there because my mom lived in that area. So, and they have hillbilly days and all the other stuff that happens there. So my mom lived there before she passed. I mean, it was for 30 years. I was going to Pikeville every year to take the kids. So as the kids got older, I had to find ways to keep them busy. And later on, it was just me and my husband going. So I had to find haunted things to do. And, there's only so many distilleries you can go to. Let's be honest. There's only so many. So I took him to this Dill Cemetery. It is up a mountain like this. There's stairs. You have to climb all these stairs. I don't know how they're getting the caskets up there. Okay. Let's be honest. And it was way up there. I had to stop and take a seat on the way up the hill because it was that bad. It's that steep. And so when we get up there, it's named after Colonel Dills. But again, as I'm walking through, I'm seeing all these Hatfields and McCoys and all this other stuff. Across the way, you can see another graveyard where there's more Hatfields and McCoys that are buried. And one of them her name is Octavia Hatcher. She was related to the Hatfields.
Uh-huh.
Her husband was distraught because his wife died, but they said she died of a broken heart. She just lost a baby. So they buried her. She wasn't dead. They thought she was dead from sleeping sickness. So they didn't know about sleeping sickness in Pikeville at the time. So when they heard about it, they went back up to the grave and they dug her up. And when they dug her up, the inside of her casket had scratch marks. Her fingernails were in there and stuff. She ended up dying accidentally. But they had said that she had died before that. If you read her obituary before that, it says that she died from a broken heart of losing her child. And her gravestone is a statue of her holding her baby. There in Pikeville.
I love this story. This sounds so familiar.
Yeah, think about it. Back at the time of sleeping sickness, a lot of people died.
Yeah.
They were buried and it was too late. That was when they put the bells.
No.
Yeah, the dead ringer.
Who the bell tolled for?
No, that's different. It's the dead ringer.
Yeah, it's a dead ringer, but it's also that too.
Yeah, they would put that. So yeah, that was one of the ones. So when he died himself, he didn't want to be buried, so he was put in a glass casket there in his home for a while before they would bury him. But he didn't want to be buried because he wanted to make sure he was dead.
Wow.
So he was part of the Hatfields and McCoy feud. I think he maybe I think he was related to Devil Anse. So, and I know, I mean, that's a horrible name, but that was his name, Devil Anse, A-N-S-E. I actually have a cookbook by the Hatfield family that was written back in the 90s. So 1990s, not the 1890s. But like I said,
wow.
my mom got to meet a lot of these people that, whose family members were buried in this graveyard because when she went to Pikeville College. Now it's called University Pikeville, up on a hill. You have to go up 99 steps to get there. So up fits. But
couldn't make it an even 100, huh?
No, it sucks.
Like that.
Well, that's like, going up when you were talking about how they got the caskets up on this cemetery, it's, Doc Holliday's is like that. It's above Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And you have to go up this trail. You're like, how did they get these you're on a trail and it's not maybe it was bigger back then, but it's a dirt trail up the side of this mountain. And it's
I'd be using a donkey and a cart.
Yeah. And you're like, really? Doc Holliday's buried up here? And you keep going. You're like, really? There's a graveyard up here? And you finally just kind of come up to the summit and there's a full-on graveyard up there.
Yeah.
Like full on. There's hundreds of people buried up there. It's a beautiful graveyard and it overlooks Glenwood Springs. And not only is Doc Holliday buried there, but Kid Curry, who ran with Billy the Kid.
Part of the Wild Bunch.
Wild Bunch with
That'd be Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
Yeah, Kid Curry.
And now back to Dodge City, Kansas. Their Boot Hill Cemetery. Mm-hmm. Again, Doc Holliday had been there. He was part of he was, there's a bunch of statues related to him there. And they had a cemetery there that was removed because it was on the highest point in Dodge City. And they said that land was too expensive to be putting dead cowboys. And they removed all the graves. And now they're somewhere else in town. They say that they're in this area there. That's the historic part of the old downtown Dodge City.
Uh-huh.
But you can't get there. You have to go into the museum. You got to pay to get in there to do this. But where that cemetery was is now called Boot Hill Distillery. And the sheriff's or the old marshal's office is there and all that. So, see, spirits and spirits, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yep. So
we should probably wrap up this conversation. We've been going for 2 hours, and I know that the three of us could probably go on for another 2 hours because we've been so many wonderful places and know about so many wonderful pieces of history. But before we go, I want you to tell us about your podcast. I unfortunately don't have a link to it. So if you can put a link to it in the chat, I would appreciate it. So people can, visit, your podcast. So tell us about your podcast.
So my podcast is The Paranormal Pride, and you can probably tell how I got the name, with the last name Pridemore. But it basically is a group of people who love the paranormal, and I have a show every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central, unless it's a holiday week. I'm on vacation, or like this week, I'm actually doing a speaking engagement for our local library. And so check it out on wbhm-db.com. And we have other programming on there as well. And I'm also a volunteer for the McPike Mansion. They have a camp out coming up on October 24th. It's the last camp out that they're going to be doing there. And it's $35 a person. No, adults only, no drinking or drugs. And if you're in the area of Alton, Illinois, you might want to check it out. I know I live in Kansas and I'm a volunteer 350 miles away, but it is what I do. And McPike Mansion is worth the time. Well,
I must say that Denise has not only a wonderful name, It's my name too. If you guys didn't know that, Denise is my name
What
also.
about the
And
nephew?
Patrick. Oh my God, that's like the oldest joke in the world. The
I know,
nephew
that's why I
thing.
had to say it.
But Denise Pridemore has her podcast is absolutely wonderful. You're on Monday nights, correct? Live on Monday nights. But you can get you can listen to it at any time.
Yes, you
I
can
will put
anytime
a
on-
link to her podcast on my community tab and in my social media. So you guys can listen for her. But if you just Google Paranormal Pride Radio, it comes up, or Denise Pridemore, that comes up also. But her podcast is absolutely wonderful. She's got tons of experience in the paranormal, the Sallie House, and a lot of other things, as you could tell by this discussion. And we thank you so much for coming on tonight. She's our first guest. If you're just coming in right now, we made an announcement in the beginning of this that we are actually starting a podcast called The Strange Podcast by Colorado Martini. The first season is actually out in September, but this discussion is actually going to be part of that with a little bit more. And so we're going to be doing some lives here and there on YouTube, but some of the podcasts are pre-recorded with some of our guests. We have one of our future guests in the chat right now, Christina and Son Ghost Squad. Christina and Son Ghost Squad do paranormal investigations in the New York City area. And they're going to come on and talk to us about Heart Island and some of the paranormal investigations that they do. If you're not familiar with Heart Island, you're going to have to stay tuned because
You'll love this one.
It's literally the second biggest graveyard in the nation, in the United States, that nobody knows about.
You know what? I used to go to Heart Island. We have a Heart Island in Maryland. And we used to go there. I almost drowned there when I was 6 years old.
This is a totally different Heart Island, and it's basically a mass grave on the entire island off the city of New York. And it actually just kind of came to view in everybody's view because that is where they've been burying COVID patients that nobody's claiming. And so the unclaimed get buried, unclaimed or forgotten or homeless, or people that nobody claimed quick enough, which is a whole nother subject, get buried on Heart Island and nobody's allowed on it. And it's very sad because people's relatives are getting buried there and by accident, and they can't go visit their relatives. And
if you elect a county, state, or city burial upon death, you end up on Heart Island.
So it's a potter's grave?
Yeah.
It
From all the hospitals in New York,
grave.
they get sent to this island, which is maintained and run by the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
Rikers Island inmates actually take care of it.
Well, they actually just transferred
bury the dead.
They just transferred responsibility over to a private company because people were shocked to see the COVID patients buried on this island and being, the way it was being treated. And so they just recently transferred everything over to the Parks Department of New York. But that's what we're going to be talking about with Christina.
You've told most of the story.
I know. See,
I just want to know if you meet spirits in New York that have an accent. My mother was a New Yorker.
We'll have to ask Christina and Sons Ghost Squad, who is going there. She is right there on the screen. She does these wonderful lives. She's if you aren't following Christina and Sons or anybody in this chat, everybody in this chat is just absolutely wonderful people. Christina does these great lives, and she's a wonderful person if you're not following her. But Denise, while you're looking down there, make sure you grab your link to your podcast and put it in the chat for us.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So you guys have
it won't allow me to put in the actual link, but you guys can copy it and paste it in, and it should work. And just that's what you'll have to do. Find me
technical.
and you can find me on Facebook, and that's where most of my stuff is on Facebook. I'm starting to move things to Parlor and MeWe to get out of the Facebook drama.
Yeah, definitely check out Denise. Again, it's if I'm saying it right, it's Paranormal Pride Radio. And you'll have to look for Colorado Martini's interview on there. She interviewed
that
us
was great.
several months ago. Every time Denise and we get on line here, we end up talking for 2 hours because we have so much to talk about. But next week, we're having another guest on Saturday night around 6 o'clock. I'm pretty sure it's 6 o'clock. I have to cement the time, but I'm pretty sure that it's 6 o'clock Mountain Time and 8 o'clock Eastern Time. But one of the best experts on the Ouija board and its history is coming on Saturday. He's actually a Denver resident here in Colorado, and he has done wonderful things to preserve the history of the Ouija board, or Ouija, Ouija is the way
that's what I've been told.
Pronounce it. And he is the head of the Talking Board Historical Society. And his society has gone out of their way to put headstones on the people that were involved in developing the Ouija board. And it's a wonderful historical story, outside the spiritual part of the Ouija board. But he has done a lot to preserve the history. And I'm sure that you've seen the picture going around the internet of the guy's headstone that's a Ouija board. Well, he was the original patentee of the Ouija board, and it was this gentleman that made sure that headstone happened. So that's next Saturday. So
and I hear the guy's got a lot of boards.
He is the biggest collector of Ouija boards in the world.
He's just a little bit bored.
Title right there, let me tell you.
And he's right here in Denver. So that's next Saturday. So we're going to actually be streaming quite a bit in October because it's kind of our month. And then the podcast will officially be out in January, and Denise, our conversation will be part of that podcast. So Denise, again, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Thank you so much for all this great information, and good night, everybody.
So long. We're signing off now.